Hello, everybody, and welcome to the PHLY Draft Show with Fran Duffy on a very busy Fran Thursday. We've got this show. We've got the PHLY Eagles show. At 2 o'clock, we're going to be talking safeties with Sean Syed. And then tonight at JD McGillicuddy's, 6 o'clock, the PHLY Draft Summit with Fran Duffy and Cuz. Go out and check it out. I'd love to be there with you. Unfortunately, we are like very much on baby watch. So
exciting times. Could happen any moment.
Yeah, I mean, there's a possibility I get a text and you're doing the rest of the show by yourself.
I think I can make do. We'll figure it out.
I mean, you got 7 rounds of mock draft to discuss.
I'll just start reading the mock draft for,
Why not?
Over the final 40 minutes.
I mean, you went through the marathon of the 7-round mock. And by the way, not just every single pick, a write-up, at least a sentence for every pick in the draft. That's insane.
When I got through, because the way I looked at it, I was like, all right, well, I did the 3-round mock last month. And in the 3-round mock, I had a write-up on every pick. So I got to at least do the first 3 rounds where I do the write-up. Otherwise, it's worse than the last one. And then when I got to the 4th round, I'm like, well, I want to comment at least on this. So I'll just give it a sentence for every pick. Some of them had 2 sentences, but 1 or 2 sentences for every selection.
Okay, there you go. By the way, if you have not checked out the actual mock draft yet, you can do so by becoming a diehard. Go to allphly.com, become a diehard. You get access to not just that 7-round mock draft, but the entire Fran Duffy draft database. You get to walk inside his mind, see what's peeking around in there. And we're going to answer lots of questions about this mock draft as we go through it, Fran. We are a week away.
I know. Exciting.
Very exciting.
I'm really fired up for this draft. I was asked a few weeks ago, is it disappointing that the first draft you get to cover like nationally, that it's kind of like a lackluster group? And I said, well, you know what? I think that the night one is going to be so fun that it will offset any of that. Yeah. It's going to be a fun Thursday night.
A bunch of surprises, and we will get into them because they start earlier in this draft. But let's work our way through it. We won't do every single pick. Got to give you a little bit of something to keep you going back to make sure that you actually read the article. But number 1, Cam Ward, feels done and dusted at this point. And number 2, Cleveland. We had the show. I can't remember if it was last week or the week before, where we talked about the tendencies for the teams, for the decision makers. And as you write in this Browns write-up, Andrew Berry, you would think, would lean toward the line of scrimmage in this decision between the 2 elite non-quarterbacks in this draft, Travis Hunter and Abdul Carter. However, this is very interesting what you say here, and I want to ask you about it. You say the team just paid Myles Garrett a large sum of money. The team has not met expectations from a performance standpoint in the win column. Whenever you're picking this high, the likelihood of ownership becoming involved in the decision-making process increases. Hunter brings a bit more sizzle to the party as a marketable asset. Are you telling me you think that Jimmy Haslam is putting his thumb on the scale here?
I think that, yes. And I think that that's something that we have come to expect
from Jimmy. Because that has worked out so well for the Cleveland Browns when he's done that.
1,000%. So it's something that we've come to expect over the last few years. But I do think anytime a team is picking up that high, especially if there's going to be a quarterback involved or the number 1 pass rusher or a reigning Heisman Trophy winner, that the ownership tends to get involved there. Look, it's going to be the other interesting part of that is that Travis Hunter has said numerous times like he wants to play both ways. I want to play both ways. I want to play offense and defense. Andrew Berry was really the first voice from the NFL to come out and say like, yeah, we view him as a receiver first. And to me, if you are a team that views him as a receiver first, we've talked about this. He's probably not playing corner because do you think Jim Schwartz is going to be like, oh yeah, we're going to throw this guy out there 10 plays a game? Like that's probably not the way that's going to operate. So I think that part of it is fascinating as well.
Yeah, and I saw Berry today said again, reaffirmed they see him as a wide receiver first, cornerback second. I don't know. I feel like Jim Schwartz could get a little spicy. He might not mind it.
I mean, I'm sure he doesn't mind having a player like that, but the idea that he's going to play both ways but focus on receiver first, I just think that's a tough ask.
I think there is something to be said about the state of America, about a billionaire making the decisions and then blaming his underlings for the bad decisions that he made and giving him more excuse to step in again. Maybe we'll say that for another time.
Yeah, that's probably
that sort of explains the state of the Cleveland Browns.
No question. That's how he got here. I mean, he basically, Jimmy Haslam, like took the blame at the owners' meetings, right? That was one of the things he talked about. Was that at owners' meetings?
I think that's right.
Am I remembering that correctly? Where he basically said, like, yeah, like that's on us. That's on me. And he also said, like, we wanted to make Deshaun Watson work, and it clearly was a mistake. I mean, very much it came out and said that. So very interesting. We'll see what Cleveland does. It does seem, especially like all the mock drafts I've seen in the last week or so.
Yeah, they're starting to tilt that way.
It looks like it's going to be Hunter.
Okay, and so that means then you're the Giants at number 3, and you can buy into this sort of dog and pony show that they've been doing over the past week or so. We're bringing in all these quarterbacks. We're working them out. We're really considering Shedeur at number 3. Maybe they would look for a trade down. Maybe, the brain trust there doesn't feel like they have the staying power to do that. Or they stick and pick Abdul Carter and add to what is probably their biggest strength on the team roster-wise.
Yeah, I do think what you said there was right, that I don't think that they're viewing this as an opportunity where Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll can afford to trade out. I think that's probably best for the long-term health of the franchise. They say, like, oh, we can hold Abdul Carter for a king's ransom here. I do think, Joe Schoen said yesterday, I believe it was with his meeting with the media, that they like the options available to them. That they're fine sitting there and taking who's going to be available after the Cleveland Browns select. That said, in conversations I've had in the last couple of weeks, it's that they would definitely prefer Travis Hunter over Abdul Carter. You've already got plenty of money and assets tied into the pass rush position. I think they'd rather have Hunter than Abdul Carter. That said, what I'm also hearing, and this goes into the Cleveland Browns, and something I may have had them doing in this mock draft, was taking Travis Hunter at number 2 and then trying to make a move to select Shedeur Sanders later in the round, or potentially as early as in the early part of day 2. They have the first pick of round 2. And so I think it's going to be very interesting if Cleveland is going to be the team to make that. But if you're the New York Giants and you hear, oh, well, if they do want Shedeur Sanders, I'm sure they're hearing some of the same stuff. If they want Shedeur Sanders, we're going to try and force their hand. We're going to say, oh, yeah, we could take Shedeur Sanders at number 3, make them take Shedeur at 2, so then that way you can pounce on Travis Hunter. I'm not buying Giants and Shedeur Sanders love. Can you imagine them signing Jameis Winston and Russell Wilson and drafting a quarterback number 3? It does not make sense. Like it's like Occam's razor. there's in no world does that make sense. They're not doing that. So I think all this is
it's the kind of thing that, like, and listen, we all watched the Hard Knocks.
Yeah,
with Joe Schoen. It's the kind of thing a dumb person would think a smart person would do.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Right. I just, that to me, that would be very, very surprising in that market. Like knowing what you would create by doing that. I just don't see that.
Okay. Now, you say it in the write-up, maybe the pivot point of this draft. I mean, in some order, it really does feel like those first 3 picks will be those first 3 picks.
Yep.
Where do the Patriots go? How do you build around Drake May and put him in a position to be successful? Or do you try to add to Mike Vrabel's defense? You have them going with the offensive line here, which does sort of seem like the thing that would make sense.
Yeah, it's fascinating that we are a week out and we still don't know for sure the way that the number 4 pick is going to go. I was talking, most people do feel it's going to be offensive line. That's the way I do have them going. That said, I've had conversation. I was talking with somebody with a team last week and said, I think Ashton Jeanty is going to go in the top 6, but not necessarily at number 6. I think that Ashton Jeanty at 4, there's a little bit of potential there. I think that when you're looking at Mason Graham, I think that that's a possibility there. If Shedeur Sanders were to go, obviously that creates the opportunity for an Abdul Carter to end up in New England. He took that visit. To me, he doesn't go up to New England if he doesn't think that's possible. Yeah. Right? He just took that visit there. It was either Monday or Friday. All the days are blurring together, but he just took a visit there recently. He's not going up there unless he thinks there's a possibility that happens. So at the end of the day, I do think that it'll be an offensive lineman. Depending on who you ask, it's Will Campbell or Membu.
I feel like I would have leaned Membu.
I had it as Membu early. You go back and you look at Doug Marrone, who's the offensive line coach. Yeah. His voice carries weight on that staff that they brought in there under Mike Vrabel. A lot of the linemen that he has been with, that he has drafted when he's been the head coach or has been the offensive coordinator or the offensive line coach, assistant head coach, have kind of fit the Membu profile more so than the Will Campbell profile. But I think that there's more love in the building for the character culture setter that Will Campbell is.
And if your entire offensive line is terrible, if you're taking Will Campbell and there's like, okay, well, if we do have to move him to guard, at least there's going to be a spot for him no matter what.
Yes, I agree. I think that's the way I kind of see it.
Okay.
I agree.
All right, so we move on there. And this is a big surprise that you have at 5.
Right.
You said Jeanty top 6, maybe not 6. The Jacksonville Jaguars.
Yeah.
Jeanty at 5.
So here's my thing. So I mentioned I've been on the phone a lot over the last couple of weeks. So since the pro day circuit comes to a close, that's when the phone calls really pick up. And it's look, sometimes you're chasing your tail. You hear there's lots of things being thrown around, lots of possibilities. So I'm not going to put something in here like this unless I feel like either I'm hearing it from multiple people or there's possibilities. Maybe it meets up with some other breadcrumbs. To me, when I look at James Gladstone, the new general manager, 34 years old, not a lot known about his impact on the LA Rams. Liam Cohen, new head coach, has only been an offensive coordinator in the league for 1 year, spent a lot of time in college before that. You go to the offensive coordinator, Grant Udinski, one of the youngest offensive coordinators in all of NFL. There's not a lot of runway with him. So there's just so much unknown with the Jaguars. That's why it is a complete wild card team. Everybody is saying, oh yeah, Mason Graham. I just think like knowing what we know about that ownership group, that front office, where the GM comes from, where Gladstone comes from, where Liam Cohen, his background, I think they want to go offense.
Yeah. Can I throw another one at you?
Tyler Warren.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what I mean. Like, I think that it's an offensive player.
I think about the Rams, right?
Yep.
Didn't care much about age. That's a bit of a ding on Tyler Warren. They've had some success there.
Right.
Yeah, like finding an offensive weapon for Liam Cohen, and their wide receiver room is okay.
Yep.
There's not an obvious spot to go there. I feel, and their tight end room is terrible. Brenton Strange, right? Like,
yeah, a former teammate of Tyler Warren.
I kind of feel like that could be the pick.
The team just paid Trevor Lawrence a huge sum of money, and then he went on to have a very disappointing season.
Yeah.
I think that they want to do what they can to lift him up and make him as good as possible. That's why I feel
that's
like
what he was hired to do, Liam Cohen.
No question. And so that's why I'm like, all right, I feel like this is going to be an offensive pick. And I heard from that one person that was like, oh yeah, like Jeanty in the top 6, but not necessarily at 6.
Mm-hmm.
I also talked with somebody else who was like, oh yeah, like I feel good about Jeanty at 5.
Okay.
So I was like, okay, I'm going to go with this.
Well, do you think the delta between Jeanty and Travis Etienne is greater than the delta between Tyler Warren and Brenton Strange?
I think there's some unknown with Strange. I think that there's more, you get more bang for your buck, I think, with Jeanty. Like, I think that he does more to elevate your offense than I think Warren would personally.
Yeah. I mean, I think it would be a bad pick.
I think either of them
probably
would
so.
be bad picks.
But I don't. The like taking a running back to help your quarterback. That's if you have a bad quarterback,
right? Sure, I think that's fair.
And maybe they think that they have a bad quarterback,
right?
But okay, but that's not evaluation. That's forecasting.
Yeah, I want to give some love to our friend Dane Brugler as well. We both
never heard of him.
We did not talk about.
I cannot believe you guys dropped your 7 rounders on the same day.
I know, it was
what the hell?
When I found out it was going to happen, I was like, oh, this is going to be very fun. We didn't talk about like picks or anything. We had the same top 8. We both had Jeanty going number 5 overall. So yeah, we'll see. It'll be interesting to watch.
Okay, that's fun. Love a Dane.
Of course, love Dane.
Okay, so 6. I mean, first of all, is this really like Jeanty's floor?
I don't think so.
He could go lower, right?
I think he could. I don't think that it's 100% that even if Jeanty was on the board that he would end up with the Raiders. I said this a couple weeks ago. I thought my spidey sense is up that this is a smokescreen from the Raiders, just because it's everywhere they're saying like, oh yeah, Jeanty. Yes, he loves this part. So I have a sneaky suspicion that this, if it was Mason Graham or Jalen Walker. A corner. A lot of people are saying corner because it's such a dire need. I think it's probably a little rich for the corner spot.
Use your 6 overall pick on a need.
Yeah, Jalen Walker does feel like a Pete Carroll type of selection.
Okay.
So that one, my spidey sense is up that is not Jeanty, even if he's on the board.
But you have Mason Graham as the pick here.
He, I think, checks a lot of boxes.
Give yourself a really good defensive line.
Yeah, give yourself a good defensive line with Christian Wilkins, who you paid a lot of money to last year. You have Max Crosby. You drafted Tyree Wilson in the top 10 a couple years ago. So yeah, Mason Graham was the pick there.
Okay, so the Jets at 7, and we were talking before the show, and you said this was one of the choices where You spent the most time deliberating and
Yes.
going back and forth on the selection.
Yeah, to me, this is a 2-player race.
Okay.
I think this is either going to be Armand Membou or Tyler Warren, depending on the day and the person you ask. It's like, oh yeah, I feel good that it's going to be Warren, and then somebody else, it's like, I feel good it's going to be Membou.
So you don't think that even with a defensive coordinator, head coach, and Aaron Glenn, you think that you still want to go offense?
Everyone I've talked to, it's going to be one of those 2 players, and so. Honestly, like when I'm going to have another mock that comes out morning of on Thursday morning, it might be Warren.
Really?
Yeah, it might be Warren.
I mean, you gotta go. You gotta go with the tackle.
Yeah, I agree. This is I'm going off of going off of how I feel. What they're going to do. I would take Membou as well in that spot. But this was a team that it came down to them last year. Is it going to be Olu Fashanu, the left tackle from Penn State, or is it going to be Brock Bowers, the tight end from Georgia? They obviously went with Fashanu. I wonder if they flip it this year and go with the tight end.
Interesting. I mean, a different GM,
different staff. No question.
I mean, the question is, who does Brick want?
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
No, I'll talk about ownership getting involved.
Yeah. All right. The Panthers at 8.
This is a tough one,
a pick you don't believe in. But.
I know, and honestly, I actually think that this is another one like the Jacksonville pick. Like the Raiders pick, where it's like, oh, everyone's saying, oh, yep, Mason Graham to Jacksonville. Oh, yeah, Ashton Jeanty at 6 to the Raiders. The Jalen Walker pick to Carolina.
This also feels like, to me, I know that like the top 3, there's a drop-off after the top 3. The order you have 4, 5, 6, 7, taking away positional value for Ashton Jeanty, it feels like Membou, Graham, and Campbell is its own separate tier. And so now you get to 8, and that's a different tier drop off.
I think so. I think that's probably fair. I think Carolina would love to trade, and I think that there would be options there. If Jeanty were to fall, this would be a great opportunity for Carolina to trade with Dallas or to trade with Chicago or anyone that wanted to go up to secure Jeanty. Trading up for a running back that in the top 10 that does feel like a hefty price. People have talked about that with Dallas. To give up what you would need to move up, into the top 10 to select a player, that would be a big asking price. I don't know that Carolina's going to get any takers to move down. I kind of think it might be Mykel Williams there.
Okay,
that's one. I think that's the ceiling for Mykel Williams. So that would be a player certainly to watch in that spot at number 8 overall.
Well, listen, you could make the case with Walker. You can make the case with Mykel Williams. If this is in fact a teardrop, who has the most upside? I mean. I am with you that I don't really think that it's there with Jalen Walker necessarily, but the people who like Jalen Walker, they like him because he has this potential super high ceiling.
Exactly.
It would make sense to sort of swing for that, don't you think?
And the reason why I ended up going, I go back to my notes and I watched every press conference after the draft last year, and it felt like every single pick after, Dave Canales and Dan Morgan come to the podium, and all they did was harp on the versatility and the multiplicity of every guy. That was like a huge theme with every single player they picked, and that happens to be one of the big selling points for Jalen Walker. So that's why I settled on Walker, but I think I wrote it in there. Like, I don't feel ironclad about that selection.
Okay, at number 9, the Saints now seems like the team that could pull a trigger on Shedeur, and if Shedeur doesn't go here, then you start to wonder how far is he really going to fall, given the Derek Carr news. You don't have them doing that.
So I started this mock draft Friday morning. And I got through a chunk of the first round by the time the Derek Carr news had happened. I'd passed the Saints at this point. All of the stuff that I've done, all the work that I've done talking with people, Saints are not taking a quarterback at 9. That's everything. Everyone I talked to was like, yep, Saints are not taking a quarterback this high in the draft. After the Derek Carr news breaks, I'm like, you gotta be freaking kidding me. So I'm like, all right, let me reach out to some people. I was like, do you feel like that has changed? And they're like, no, they're not taking Shedeur Sanders at 9. They're not taking Jackson Dart at 9. So I trust the people that are giving me that. So I'm going to go ahead and not give them a quarterback in that spot. It feels like defense. That has been a lot of the stuff that I've heard has been a defense to them at 9. I have heard potentially Tyler Warren. I know Dane had Tetairoa McMillan, the wide receiver from Arizona, going there. To me, though, from what I gather, I think it's going to be more defense. So that's more likely there at 9.
And you have him going Will Johnson.
Yeah, so who I think is a great fit for Brandon Staley's defense, off coverage, the coverage multiplicity. I think that one makes a lot of sense. They lose Marshawn Lattimore. They lost Paulson Adebo this offseason as well. Alontae Taylor, their other starting corner, he's entering a contract year. So I do think that's a position they value. And I think it's a position that, when you're looking at Will Johnson, great scheme fit at a primary position. He fits the profile. We talked about what the Saints like to lean to from a type standpoint. Young, athletic at prime positions. Will Johnson checks all those boxes.
All right, let's move on to number 10. And this is your first trade of the first round. Good for you for doing trade. I mean, you're doing trades in like the third round.
No, well,
you did a trade in the third round.
Oh yeah, I did. Yeah, there's. Yeah,
it's real sicko stuff.
It was uncalled for, honestly.
Well, you wanted to have him go get a running back. And you have the Indianapolis Colts, who have been linked to Colston Loveland throughout this draft process. Loveland at 14 feels like a very popular selection. You have them instead, because Tyler Warren is on the board, moving up to 10, giving up a third-round pick and taking Tyler Warren.
Yeah, I know our friends at CHGO were not happy with me with that one. They said I think they would stick and pick Tyler Warren in that situation. But I just feel like, to me, that's a spot where Chicago, who gave up some picks already this offseason, trading for some veterans, you get some of that draft capital back. The Colts, I think, are desperate for a playmaker. They want an offensive playmaker in this class. And so being able to move up, they tried last year to get up for Neighbors or Brock Bowers. They couldn't. So now they're able to get Tyler Warren in this spot. They give up a pick on day 2 in order to do so. But I think that's worthwhile in their minds.
Okay. I think so too. But
I think so.
Yeah. Okay. Now, San Francisco to me is an interesting one, because I always think that a team that thinks of itself like a Super Bowl contender, picking up that high, is ripe to sort of go for a luxury is maybe not the right word, but something that they think could put them over the hump. Instead, and maybe they think of this player this way, and I know you don't think of this player this way, but they go Jihaad Barron from Texas.
Yeah, this is a tea leaves pick for me. Just kind of reading the winds there and feeling that this could be the type of player that they would target. I do think, while they obviously, look, this is a team that got banged up last year, had a number of different spots. You would say if they were healthy, they were not going to be picking at 11 overall. They've also lost a lot of pieces, a lot of turnover. So I do think that they're trying to remake this roster on the fly a little bit, certainly in the defensive front. A lot of people I've talked to, it's like, this is going to be a corner or it's going to be a pass rusher. And some of them feel very confident in one over the other. And so it was conflicting there. I thought about Mykel Williams. I thought about Shamar Stewart. I ended up going with Barron. This one feels, we talked about the Rondé Barber comparison last week.
Yes.
This one, and there's kind of reading through the tea leaves there a little bit, that this is going to be a corner. I think that if Will Johnson were to fall, I think he would make some sense. But I ended up going with Barron. I personally would not do that, obviously, but that's where I had John Lynch going.
Okay, there you go. We'll start bouncing around a little bit, but we are going to go to 12 here because we've got our friends at DLLS to talk about, and lots of smoke about them taking a wide receiver here or an offensive playmaker. I think you think if Jeanty falls to 12, they would jump on that?
Yes, I think they would absolutely. And honestly, if he fell to 9, 10, I mean, if he fell to 10, Chicago probably takes him. So they would need to go to 9. But yeah, I think if Jeanty were to fall to that spot, he would be a Cowboy.
And do you think if Genty's gone, they would consider Omarion Hampton here over a wide receiver?
There's been some chatter about that. I don't think so. I think this is going to be a pass catcher.
And do you think that they would consider Tyler Warren if he was on the board?
I think it would be a consideration. He definitely checks a lot of their boxes. I hadn't heard them necessarily, but it might be because because Warren is likely to be off the board by that point.
Okay. Loveland, you don't think would be enough of a playmaker?
I don't think so. Yeah, I don't think so. I think that, to me, it sounds like it's going to be one of the two receivers, either Matthew Golden or Tetairoa McMillan. And this is another one.
Do you fall for the speed or do you go for the big guy?
Yeah. So Schottenheimer said at owners' meetings, and people have latched onto this quote, that we need to get faster and we want speed. So everyone is thinking Golden, but I don't know. There are some people I've talked to who's like, the Tetairoa McMillan, and we've talked about like the box checking with them, like in terms of the type of player.
Yeah.
McMillan checks more boxes for them than Golden does, just off of like their trends, what they've done in the past.
Okay. I think that's a good.
This was tough. That was a tough pick though.
Well, listen, CeeDee Lamb did not run a blazing 40.
Nope.
Right? And they've had plenty of success with him.
They are unmoved by guys that underwhelm from a testing standpoint.
Okay. We will also go with our PHNX friends and talk about the Arizona Cardinals at 15, moving up. or sorry, at 16, moving up to 13, moving up 3 spots to take the player we discussed earlier, Mykel Williams from Georgia, one of the youngest players in the draft who does have some real upside.
Yeah. So basically, anytime I've done a mock draft and I would get to the Cardinals at 16, like, man, they just missed out on this group of players that I think would make a lot of sense. And I think anybody that they would take here that would make sense on and off the field for the Cardinals and Jonathan Gannon and Monty Ossenfort, it feels a little early. So I do think for that reason, and Monty Ossenfort has been a big mover and shaker. He likes to move up. He likes to move back. So here I liked them to move up to try and secure the services of Mykel Williams. I think Shedeur Stewart would make sense there as well with some of the things that they've done in the past. But I end up going with Williams. It could very easily be Stewart.
I'm thinking about draft night. Now, we're going to be live all of draft night, Thursday night. Fran, Zach Berman, and myself, looking forward to it. Should be a lot of fun. We're going to be live all night Friday night and then live all day Saturday. So the entire draft, we're going to be live talking. But on Thursday night, you've got some other responsibilities. You got to go on when the other teams are on the clock. And as you have it plotted out here, Fran, you're going 12, 13, 14.
I thought about that.
Dallas, Arizona, Chicago.
Yeah.
You don't want Denver trading up to 15 to make it a clean sweep, 4 for 4?
Yeah, I did think about that. I was like, oh man, this would be really tough. But it would be fun. Again, it's going to be fun. So if you had a bunch of dealing there with a bunch of the All-City teams, that would certainly make Thursday night a
Well, at 14, after moving back down from 10, you have the Bears then taking Shedeur Stewart, who you don't necessarily believe in as a player, but in terms of body type, he does feel like a Dennis Allen edge.
And also, this is a front office led by Ryan Poles that has said in the past, like, they grade the flashes of players. So, and that when you're looking at production, and honestly, when I'm looking at who are the teams that would make sense for Shedeur Stewart, Chicago is one of those teams that absolutely makes sense for Stewart when you factor in the types of players that they've brought in the past. Where they drafted in the 3rd round Dominique Robinson, the pass rusher from Miami, Ohio, a couple of years ago, who barely played, had no starts, very little production. This is a team that has taken chances on players like this. This would obviously be the biggest one, but I think that it is definitely someone that it would be in their wheelhouse. He was just in for a visit last week. That has been predictive for the Bears in the past. So the CHGO guys were not happy with me when I went on with them on Wednesday, but I do think that
who do they want?
They think it would be if Tyler Warren was there for them at 10, that they would stick and pick and select Tyler Warren. But if not, like even on the board, like like they could take Kelvin Banks, they could take this, and they were happy with how the rest of the draft unfolded. And I knew that was going to be the case. I warned Hogue. I was like, look, you're not going to be happy with round 1. You're going to like the rest of it, and they did like the rest of it. But round 1 was
who is it that if it's not Tyler Warren, is there like those guys? Who do they want?
It's come down to is it a good player at a non-primary position, or you're taking a risk on like a Mykel Williams? I think they all like Williams over Stewart. We're talking like Hogue and Braggs and Carmen, those guys. So I don't want to speak for all of them, but the sense I've gotten talking with them once a week, twice a week, has been, give us Jeanty, Warren, Mykel Williams. That kind of group, maybe a Kelvin Banks if there were a trade down, which they pass on Banks in this scenario. If
we move away from the specific picks for a second, I'm thinking about it because you've got a couple guys here, Emin Worry and Kelvin Banks and Walter Nolan, who have pretty wide ranges within the first round. We talked about Matthew Golden potentially going at 12 overall. You've got him out all the way to the sort of the mid-early second round. Who are the players you think have that, and maybe this is just the nature of this draft in general.
It is.
But have that super wide range on draft night.
Yeah, Golden is one. It's funny because basically how I go pick by pick, right? Like,
of course.
That's
the only way that's how it works.
That's how it works. So, and you go through and it's like, all right, the Atlanta Falcons are on the clock at 15. Whoever it is. So I'm up and I'm like, okay, is this a trade down opportunity? Is there a team that's behind them that would like to move up? All right. If not, all right, they're sticking and picking who's the selection here. But now I'm going through my notes and it's all right. Like I've heard this player, that player, that player, that player. All right, here's these 4. Who fits what they would like to do? Is the pre-draft interest there? Does that matter for this team? So you're taking all of these factors into play. I struggled with Matthew Golden after the Dallas pick because it was like, they're kind of 50-50, like flip a coin if it's him or Tetairoa McMillan. But then after that, it was like Houston maybe. Maybe the Packers, but the Packers don't take receivers early. He's been linked to them a little bit, but I don't think that's an option there.
It's one of those ones where if you were just thinking about where is Matthew Golden going to go, you're thinking, okay, this is wide receivers go, wide receivers with speed definitely go. He's probably going to go before you have him selected to go, but as you go through it, who is the team who's going to actually pull the trigger on him? maybe there's not someone there.
And there's going to be players, just like there are going to be players that go higher than we think. There are going to be players, obviously,
of course,
that go
yeah.
lower. And I just, to me, like Golden was one that fell out for me. Then you get into the guys where it's and this is, I think, a theme of this draft, because there is not that like high volume of blue chip talent. We get to that next tier where there are questions like the Walter Nolan, like off-field stuff, the Mike Green with the accusations. You go through obviously Shamar Stewart with the profile. Teams are going to have to make concessions, and honestly, like a lot of teams talk the talk when it comes to like character stuff, and so you're going to be forced into some of these decisions where it's like, all right, like this guy's talent warrants him going this high. But what are you willing to give up?
And it gets into risk aversion and all that stuff. It's why I kind of think like a guy like Tyler Booker, who is projected to probably go like late first round, but is like checks all the boxes from a character standpoint. Like I feel like he could be a sleeper to go like 11 overall or something like that to a team that just wants to hit a single.
It's honestly why I think all the buzz about like Mason Taylor going in the first round for that exact reason. I think that there are going to be some guys that go that high. Like I'd be shocked if Tyler Booker fell out of the first round. I'd be really, really surprised.
Yeah.
And a lot of people felt like, after the combine, like, he's not going to go that high. I'd be shocked if he was out of the top 25. Mason Taylor going in the first round would make sense because there's not a lot of questions in the profile. I had Gray Zabel falling out of the first round. I think it's more likely that he's in. He was just one where I struggled to find the right fit, especially after Minnesota traded out of the first round. I struggled finding that fit there for Gray Zabel. So I think that this is a draft where it's this case every year. It's the case every year. But when you're looking at these guys there, where there's some volatility there and there's some risk, I struggled finding the teams that would be willing to take on that risk because it's become such a talking point for a lot of these decision makers.
All right, let's go to number 20.
Okay.
Let's stick with our all-city brethren, DNVR. The Denver Broncos at 20, sticking and taking the second best running back in the draft by most accounts, Omarion Hampton from North Carolina.
Yeah, have heard that there's a lot of love in Denver for Omarion Hampton. They had Trayvon Henderson in yesterday for a visit. I know some of our DNVR crew said, like, I think that there's a chance that they like Henderson more than Hampton. I haven't heard one way or the other there. I've just heard that they really like Hampton, and if Hampton's there, that he is likely to be the pick.
Okay.
And that's from two or three different people. So I feel good about that one. So I stuck with it. So I do think that there's options for, if they want that movable joker pass catching type, there are options for them later, and I ended up giving them one later that I think that can still fill that role, and then you still get that every down workhorse with Hampton, which is harder to replicate later.
If you're Denver and you're hoping for Hampton, we talked about Dallas at 12 as a possibility for a running back. Arizona's not going to take a running back, right? Chicago, I guess they could.
Yep.
They could go Hampton, right? Atlanta's not doing it. Miami's not doing it. Cincinnati?
For running back,
probably not. Seattle, probably not. Tampa Bay, certainly not. So yeah, I mean,
it's Pittsburgh at 21.
Pittsburgh.
That's the next. To me, like that is the floor for Hampton in my mind. But that's tough. Pittsburgh, honestly, like Pittsburgh at the end of the exercise, when I got to like round 4, I was like, man, that people in that city are not going to be happy. I think they actually like need to trade down after the trades. They're trading that 2 away. They just have a lot of holes. That's a tough team to peg.
Okay. At 21, you pegged him with Derek Harmon.
Yes. I know there was the report, Aaron Wilson reported that the meeting with Tomlin or I shouldn't say Tomlin, the Steelers and Shedeur Sanders didn't go well.
Okay.
I'm going to stick with my gun. Most of the people I talked to about Pittsburgh were basically all echoed the same sentiment that they are not taking a quarterback high in the draft, that they will take one on day 2. Basically like, all right, let's let this play out this year, and then we will be players in the market next year when it's supposed to be a stronger quarterback class. That's it. And I talked with 1 or 2 guys that felt like, oh no, like they need to take a quarterback, otherwise the defense there's gonna be a mutiny on that side. That they don't have any belief in what's going on offensively. But no, I think that there's a better chance that they pass on Shedeur than they take him.
Is there a specific day 2 quarterback that you think would make sense for them?
No. I think that Milroe could be a possibility for them, but the problem is they don't have the second round pick. So that's why they got.
All
I
the
got
more
to,
reason to trade down.
Yeah, so that's why I got to the third round, and the last guy there was musical chairs, was Quinn Ewers, and I was like, I think this is probably still a little early for Ewers. I have heard like some late day 2, like round 3 stuff for Ewers, but I was like, I feel like they have to take somebody. Rodgers is going to be there. It sounds like Rodgers is going to be there.
Supposedly, he's making some kind of announcement today.
Supposedly, I'm sure it'll wait one more week.
I don't even want to give that oxygen.
Yeah, right. So to me, they were one of the trickiest teams for the draft. That said, like I don't think it's quarterback round 1. Everything I heard was D tackle round 1. So we'll see.
Okay.
Or if not, then Marion Hampton.
We talked about Loveland as a player with an interesting disparity. You have him at 22 to the Chargers, which has been sort of a popular link.
That's a chalk pick. Yep.
You give Herbert a guy to throw to. You got the Michigan connection. Seems like it makes sense.
Yeah, this was another tough team to really kind of pin down. I was talking with some media members out there as well. They didn't really have like a great sense that they feel like they were able to address a lot of needs in free agency, and that ideally they wanted a pass catcher. So this was a Matthew Golden possibility if Loveland was off the board. That said, I did go with Loveland. This chalk pick felt right.
All right, you make the trade up from Cleveland that you talked about before. They maybe want to pair Travis Hunter with Shedeur Sanders, get Shedeur Sanders. You've got him moving up to 24, sending 33 overall, for the first pick of the second round, 94, which is a third round pick, a 6th, and another 6th to go get Shedeur Sanders.
Real
Defend
quickly.
yourself.
No, well, so
go ahead.
I think this is the area of the draft where a team would move up for Shedeur. Any thought of the Giants or the Browns moving up into we'll say 15, to the Atlanta Falcons?
Yeah,
that doesn't make sense. If you were going to give up future capital, like future, because to move from 33 to 15, you are giving up a future first round pick.
Right.
Then take the guy at 2 or take the guy at 3. To me, it does not make sense to me to say like, oh yeah, we're going to give up 3 picks, move up to 15, and take them.
Well, it makes sense if you are delusional. If you're thinking to yourself, okay, we're not going to. If you're the Browns and you think we have a good team, a good roster, we need a quarterback, but we don't expect to be picking in the top 10, so we're going to take our chance to get an elite player now at 2 or 3. And then we'll trade our first round pick, which is likely to be, 20th overall next year. We'll trade that in order to get the quarterback. You can see the thinking.
Yeah.
I can see it with Cleveland much more than I could see it with the Giants.
I can see it with Cleveland much more than the Giants for sure, for the reasons we talked about.
Yeah.
I think that it will become a game of chicken. And it's because you know what it is that, and I think I outlined it there, is the decision for a team that wants to trade up for Shedeur Sanders is how close is Shedeur to Tyler Shuck, Jalen Milroe, Jackson Dart, insert quarterback here. And then what is the disparity there? Like, would you rather have Shedeur Sanders or Tyler Shuck and a second round pick and a third round pick, right? Like that's those, and you're able to basically say like, okay, it's not just a second round pick and a third round pick. It's insert players, like actual names into that and say like, okay, we can select this player and that player with these selections. What would you rather have? Is it worth it? Is that worth that gamble? That's why I don't think it would be a big jump. I think you're talking a team in the early stages of round 2 that gets in the latter stages of round 1 to select Shedeur Sanders. Who knows? Like, I don't think it's out of the question that it even gets to the Eagles at 32. Like, it could get to that point. I don't think that's out of the question.
And who else do you think could be in contention for that aside from the Giants and Browns? The Rams potentially?
Potentially. I think the Rams could be there. Like I said, I don't think it's the Saints. The Raiders are a sneaky team that's kind of laying there in the weeds.
And then the Jets.
I'm trying to think off the top of my head. I think that's it.
I think that's about it.
I had the Colts selecting a quarterback.
I know. I like this pick.
Yeah, I had the Colts selecting a quarterback. I don't think that it was that.
You're going to have to read it to see which second round pick the Colts make. That's a shocking pick at quarterback, which I love. I love that.
I think it would make a lot of sense. Yeah. But I don't think that they would make the move up for Shedeur. So yeah, it's going to be one of the big stories. Certainly, we know that. Going into draft night.
All right, we talked about the Tyler Booker Texans at 25.
Yeah, I think.
They got to go offensive line, right?
Yep.
And I think Tyler Booker is like you're hitting a single, hoping maybe you can turn it into a double, but you feel good.
I honestly think it would be like a double. You hope it turns into a triple.
Oh, okay.
I mean, I like Booker
a
a little bit. I like Booker. I think he makes a lot of sense on and off the field. I've heard potentially Zabel. I've heard Matthew Golden there. That was one of the Matthew Golden teams. That's basically been it. It's been O-line or Kelvin Banks is the other one. That would be a guy that I think they could trade up for. I think the Texans would be interested in moving up, and Kelvin Banks would be the target there. And certainly if he were to fall to them, I think that he would be the pick.
Okay. We have a super chat to get to from our friend Rich Bobby, who says, other than talking to coaches and evaluating the film, is there any other way teams evaluate a prospect's want to? Love the draft coverage, guys. Thank you. Thank you, RB. Yeah,
that is the like basically priority number one for the area scouts. Like boots on the ground, for the men and women that are going into these buildings and tracking down sources. You're talking with assistant coaches, support staff, tracking down, like, depending on the prospect, even digging like even further than that into the background and just trying to decipher like what is it. I started talking about like the character end of things. That obviously is it's a huge umbrella term, and it can mean so many different things. And there are some guys that are turnoffs from a character standpoint. Maybe they're not, quote unquote, tough enough to last in the NFL. There might be criminal stuff. There might be, is this guy a fit in our offensive line room or in our secondary room, right? There might be, is he coachable? The intelligence, like there are all these different things, and we on the media, and basically when we get that filtered into us from teams, it's like there's some character stuff to worry about. Like it's a huge thing for some guys. It's something very, very small. For some, it's a lot bigger.
And obviously, it's all a sliding scale.
Yeah,
right? It's like if this guy's like this on tape, we're willing to accept some of this stuff. If this guy's just over here and he's like we're talking about a 5th round pick, then yeah, it's not worth the bother.
Yeah, and so basically, how I go into these conversations when I'm talking with people around the league about it is like, okay, what are we talking about when it's like stuff off the field, and is it prohibitive? Is it something where you're like, nope, like we're moving on, or like it's definitely going to make him drop? And then you kind of move on from there. And that's the first way I phrase it is like, is this prohibitive? Is this keeping you from drafting this guy as high as he should go? But I think people just kind of say, oh yeah, like off field. And it's like, but there's lots of different layers to that and different lenses to look at it through.
And so what, to Rich's question, what are the other ways in which teams try to evaluate that stuff?
I mean, I'm going to be honest, the more you, and Rich alluded to it there, like the more you watch film on players over the years, like I'm starting to get a little bit better at like trying to diagnose that through film. Like you can see that a little bit, like the guys that, the give a crap factor with guys.
And which, listen, it's not great, but that's what matters to them the most.
Yeah.
Is like we'll deal with you being a headache off the field if you are giving it 110% on the field.
I mean, there's so many instances you can look back, and if you're an Eagles fan watching, like we're not talking down on players. It is what it is. Like Danny Watkins, Danny Watkins had a lot of ability, like just wasn't he didn't love it.
Yeah.
Right. Like he was interested in other stuff. And so, that's a very, very important part of the equation.
Well, it's also a good transition to a pick that is like, you see a pick and you're like, oh, that's perfect. And there are some teams where that off-field stuff moves guys up the board. And so the Kansas City Chiefs trading up for Mike Green feels like a pretty nail in the head.
Yeah, I just struggled with Mike Green.
And I don't know. I know.
I don't
It's
either.
Not fair for us to just lump him in with some real nasty stuff that the Chiefs have dealt with in the past. But
I struggled with it, and because again with the Mike Green stuff, it's nothing like confirmed, like it's all accusations, but I don't know which team is going to feel good about it. Every team's going to make that decision on their own, and so it's just tough to kind of predict how that's going to go. Some people, a lot of people in this role, in the media, it's just like I almost have to put it to the side because it's impossible to tell. I factored that in, but it's tough.
I want to ask you about an interesting pick at 29, a player who I have not really seen get a lot of round one buzz. And you talked about it on yesterday's PHLY draft show when we talked about the corners. Benjamin Morrison at 29 from Notre Dame, sneaking into the first round.
Yeah, I've heard more buzz in recent weeks. I think part of that is that the medical recheck in Indianapolis just happened recently, and I think that it seems like if he's getting this kind of buzz, my guess is that the recheck went okay in terms of his hip surgery. He missed the back half of the season due to having to get surgery on that hip. It's his second time having hip surgery. That is a red flag for me personally. That's a little bit worrisome, especially for a corner.
Probably not great.
Yeah, not ideal. But
that's a red flag for my grandma.
All right, but he's a great kid. Like aces off the field character wise, and the film is good. Like the film, I don't think the film's great, but I think the film is really good. And if he's healthy, he's going top 20.
And you asked that question
yes.
of Adam Peters at the combine, doubling down on after last year when they made some picks that were guys who looked like reaches based on the consensus board, who they were maybe overvaluing like the culture building character stuff. Maybe this would make sense for them to once again do that at 29.
I do think that is going to be a factor, for them. And that's what, again, like so many teams talk the talk with it. Who walks the walk? They walked the walk last year when it came to like the character acquisitions. So for them, like I wasn't penciling in any players that had those kind of question marks off the field.
31, the Rams. This was one of your favorite matches in the first round. They're going Ohio State's Emeka Egbuka.
Yeah, this is just because they are a dart throw team, and in terms of trying to predict what they're going to do.
Yeah, you like this one?
I do like this one. There was a quote last year. I'm trying to remember when it was. It was
ask not for fewer problems. Ask for broader shoulders.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't that one.
Be the thermostat, not the thermometer.
No, it wasn't that one. And it wasn't. He's pooping. It wasn't that either.
By the way, somebody in the chat I noticed wrote he pooped, and it's much different because you could convince yourself that he pooped is you're just you're sharing the information so that we all know what schedule he's on. He's pooping is a cry for help. Like he's doing this right now. I can't handle this myself.
Well, it could maybe if you're looking at he's pooping right now. That's like the timestamp for when he pooped.
I guess that's true.
So there's that.
That's true. Yeah. Okay.
Benefit of the doubt.
There you go.
There was a quote from Les Snead, the GM of the Rams. It was last year, and it was talking about the Rams selecting a defensive player, which we know that they did. They ended up going defense with like at least their first 2 picks, might have been their first 3 picks last year. And it was like, if you're giving us defense, like you obviously don't know Sean, talking about Sean McVay. And it's now been a full year since then. And I know that they wanted to get Bowers last year. I know that they were thinking about receiver last year. I think this is going to be an offensive skill player. There's a chance it's O-line. I think it's going to be an offensive skill. And so I'm like, Matthew Golden would make sense. This was my favorite Luther Burden landing spot early in the process. I don't know if Burden would necessarily go there at this point, but Egbuka, I think, checks a lot of the boxes from a...
He can do the dirty work stuff.
Yes. Like line him up tight to the formation, in the slot, off the wing of the tight end. He's going to dig out safeties. He's going to do dirty work. He's really reliable at the catch point. All the Cooper Kupp stuff. I'm like, yeah, like Egbuka makes a lot of sense. They trend older. They like guys with proven resumes. I'm like, yeah, like Egbuka makes a ton of sense to the LA Rams.
I will tell you, I did the Eagles mock draft, which for a video that'll premiere on the PHLY Eagles page tomorrow. I had the Rams as the team that trains for Dallas Goedert.
Yeah, I could see that.
Right?
I can definitely see that.
Does that dirty work.
Yep.
They don't care about the age, have the use, and then they can still draft another guy.
There was a part of me that thought about doing in the 7th-round mock draft, like Dallas Goedert, Kirk Cousins, and I was like, I'm not doing this. George Pickens, like the whole deal. I was like, yeah, we're not doing this.
All right, well, we got to talk about the Eagles at 32.
Yep.
Now, this is interesting because the players on the board for them in this situation include Josh Simmons from Ohio State, who I think makes a lot of sense for the Eagles given what they want to build, right? And then they could talk themselves into this is a player with the talent that he wouldn't otherwise be here at 32, but because of the injury, he's got that. Gray Zabel, who would give them that chess piece on offense. Nick Scorton, who we will get to in a minute. And then you've got also Matthew Golden and Luther Burden and Trey Amos. Josh Connerly, if you wanted to go offensive line, and James Pierce Jr., if you want just that one-track pass rusher. But you've got him trading back.
So
only 4 spots.
Yep, only 4 spots. I think I got to this point Saturday.
Okay.
So it's Saturday. And it was Saturday night. It was late Saturday night. And I got to 32. Eagles are up. And I'm like, all right, like here's exactly what we just did. I'm like, here's what's on the board. Who would they pick? I'm going through all the names. And I'm like,
I think in that scenario, I think if they had to stay,
okay,
I think they'd take Josh Simmons.
You might be right about that. The way I landed on it, it was like I think it was something that Shield said on his pod, I think. And I
we'll get to that on the 2:00 show.
Right.
I got something to say about
of
that.
course. Yeah. I think it was something Shield said on the pod, and it was like, yeah, I think that this is correct. I think this is the right way to think about it. It's the way I'm now thinking about the Eagles here at 32. With the whole Dallas Goedert situation, you move on from C.J. Gardner-Johnson. I think this is a team that's trying to get every value out of every dollar spent possible. Now, maybe you could argue that the draft, especially a first-round pick, is different than a veteran contract the way we're talking about. But to me, because we're not talking about Josh Simmons as a guard at any point. I haven't heard anybody talk about that transition, and I don't know that I love it either. I mean, I guess it's not out of the question, but I haven't heard anybody say oh yeah, he could play guard early.
But he could play guard.
Maybe. I don't know.
Why couldn't he play guard?
I know. I
mean, if
get
Mekhi Becton
yes.
can play guard, why couldn't Josh Simmons play guard?
The fact that no one's talking about it makes me wonder if that has been discussed with, and that's not something.
I feel like no one's talking about it, and I'm just because
he's a great tackle,
and everyone's like, this is a left tackle. This guy is a left tackle, and everybody needs a left tackle.
Yeah,
but if you don't need a left tackle, of course he could play guard.
I've been meaning to actually text Brandon Thorne to get his thoughts on that, because and maybe I'll do it in between shows. We'll talk about it at 2:00.
Okay,
but I don't know that they would draft a guy that would be a tackle only. Like maybe it's not Simmons. Let's say Simmons goes to Kansas City, and then Simmons isn't on the board.
Yeah.
Josh Connerly. I don't think Connerly would succeed at guard early on. I think that would be
he's much more finesse.
Yeah, that would be one that I'd be worried about. Kelvin Banks Jr. I think same kind of deal. Would you want to give that level of asset and pay money for a guy that's only going to play tackle and he's going to sit behind? I do think it's an area. I think they need to.
I disagree with this way of thinking.
I think you are right to disagree with it. I wonder if that's the way they.
No,
think
but I also disagree that it's how the Eagles.
That?
I think, especially with respect to the draft, I don't think that's how they operate.
That's where I went back.
I think we need to squeeze out every dollar spent in free agency and with the roster to allow us to be able to set the roster up to be its healthiest in the long term.
Yeah,
I think that's how they think.
I think that is probably right, but. Yeah, there's something that the way that Shield said it a couple weeks ago, I was like, yeah, so that got me going down the path. But I still think too, with all the options you laid out, I was like, all right.
But if
is there somebody and
they're only moving down 4 spots, and if there are 5 guys they like, certainly they would love to do that.
The Jaguars, they passed on Will Campbell and Armand Menbu at 5 overall. So I'm like, okay, this is a team that could be interested to move up and select a tackle. Let's see if they can make that move up. And so literally first thing Sunday morning, I'm like, all right, let's do this. They're going to make this trade, and off I went.
Okay. And so you have the Jaguars taking
trade up, and they take Josh Simmons, and then the Eagles move down to 36 overall.
And take?
They select Nick Scorton, the pass rusher from Texas A&M. This was a player that was in for a visit late last week or middle of last week. I like Nick Scorton's film. I didn't love his film, in terms of top 15, top 20, but I think when you get to this point in the draft, I think it's a perfectly fine pick. Even if they picked him at 32, if he goes off the board at 29, if he goes, somewhere in there, I think that's a perfectly fine range for this player. I like the profile, extremely young, violent, competitive, good kid off the field. I think the tape last year was not as good as the tape the year before, but we talked about it on yesterday's show, the context behind that. So, I think that I'd be fine with this pick if that's the way they went.
Okay.
Even at 32.
I think it would be they couldn't get an offer that they liked. Hold your nose and take him. But I think it would be an okay swing.
Yep.
All right, you can read the entire 7-round mock draft on allphly.com. Become a diehard. I got a few questions left, but make sure that you check that out. My first question, Fran, is: do you think you can guess what my favorite player team match that you had was? And it's one when I saw it, and I was like, "Oh, that is perfect." I'll give you 5 guesses, or you want to do
is it Willie Lampkin
10 questions? No, but that's good.
Okay. Give me one hint.
It's a team that we discussed already in terms of the kinds of players they might want to draft.
Deion Walker to the Browns.
No. It's in the division.
In the division. Cowboys?
No.
No, who was it?
Commanders.
Okay.
I believe in the 4th round.
Right.
Drafting Cam Scatterbo.
Oh, yeah, right.
That's a perfect.
Yeah.
That is exactly who they're going to want to draft.
And So Bo Brack asked me, because they asked me on PHNX, they asked me about Scottibo every week. And Johnny wasn't even on this week, but Bo was like, I have to ask about Scottibo. Where is he going in the mock? And so when I shared it, he was like, oh man, he was like, that's perfect.
It's perfect. Yeah. It's exactly where he's going to go.
And he was like, and Johnny is going to be especially pissed by this because he's going to Cliff Kingsbury, and Johnny hates Cliff. So it was that one fit. And honestly, like as I was looking, I was like, man, like, because Scottibo was one of those players. It's like a souped-up Kenny Gainwell, where like depending on the year, like Kenny Gainwell, sometimes he's the third down back. He could be the goal line back. He could do this. He could do. That's how I view Scottibo. Like I said, a similar kind of archetype. And when right now, like you have Brian Robinson who's going into a contract year. You have Austin Eckler who's on the back end. But they can do what they did a lot of the pony, like 2-back stuff last year. So I think that Scottibo could pick up some of that. But then next year, maybe become the full-time back. And if not, they draft above him. And he's still a change of pace guy. I thought it just made so much sense.
Perfect.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Like thank you. There are some, or that's why I love this exercise though, is that sometimes you get to some of those in like round 3, round 4, you're like, oh, like this is just a perfect. And sometimes you say like it's too perfect, but a lot of those fits happen. Like, draft weekend, we'll be sitting here on day 3 and something will happen in the round 5 and I'll be like, oh man, that is a perfect Ravens pick, or, whoever it is. That's the fun of it.
I will always remember my best mock draft moment ever.
Okay.
My freshman year of college. I did a 3-round mock.
Wow.
And predicted that Maurice Clarett, who was considered like this guy's going to be a day 3 pick, after, taking the year off or whatever. It's like the Broncos are going to take him with the last pick of the 3rd round. Like like they have the hubris to think that they're going to get the most out of him. And I remember like we were watching the 3rd round and had a couple pops and he picked. I got so excited. I was like, I cannot believe that I nailed that. That was fantastic. My other question for you before the show started had a message from our friends at Puntalytics.
Okay. Oh yeah.
257 picks, not a single punter
or kicker. Yeah. I know. I'm sorry. I wish I could say it was an accident. Yeah, I have not done that in the past, and I don't foresee myself doing it in future iterations of it, just because it's just hard to decide who's going to actually do it. So yeah.
But if you know that they're when the punt god was not
right,
like when you knew he was going to get drafted, you're going to put him somewhere. Like if there's a kicker who you know is going to get drafted.
Yes, which this year I haven't dug into the kickers enough to say like, oh yeah, but everything I've heard is like, oh yeah, there might be 1 or 2 that go, but nothing to that extent.
Okay. What else you got percolating in your mind ahead of the next 7 days of content?
One thing I felt was interesting going through the exercise. So we've talked about like talent at the top of round 1, a little bit lackluster. You get to a certain point. When I got to like the middle to late stages of round 2, I started to look at this draft and I'm like, oh, like I don't like the value for a lot of these teams. So that would be another one where like if you're the Eagles, if you're whoever, is that a trade up spot?
Yeah, is it worth going down from 32 so that then you can then go up from 64?
Yeah, that was one thing I walked away feeling, and there are some people that disagree. I was honestly, I don't think it's off the record to say that I was talking with Dane about it this morning and shared that, and he was like, I started to feel that way like late in the 3rd round, early in the 3rd round. So a little bit, it was probably like 20 picks later, but that's where he was like, yeah, that's where I felt like there was a little bit of a drop off. But that was one of my other big takeaways from the exercise was. Maybe there's that meat of late round 1 into middle of round 2, and then a little bit of a drop off, and then it levels off again in the middle stages of round 3.
Was there, as you went through it from an Eagles perspective, was there a situation that you felt like, oh man, this would be best case scenario? I mean, you've got Nolan going like 17th or 18th. You don't think
we didn't talk about that? Yeah, right.
Like, you think there's a chance he gets to 32?
I do think there's a chance.
Yeah.
I would say where I had him going is the high mark of where I think he could go. That was a tip one. That was a they've spent a lot of time with this player, and a lot of the how do I phrase this? They spent a lot of time with a few players last year, and they drafted two or three of them. So like when they invest a lot of time with a player, like then I would definitely pencil them in. So that's why I went there. For a team that's looking for defensive like difference makers, I thought that made a lot of sense.
And then the last one I'll ask you about, Elijah Arroyo, who you have the Eagles taking at 64. Yep. This is an interesting one because I feel like if Warren and Loveland go early, top 25, Mason Taylor's probably going to be the 3rd guy drafted. Is there going to be enough runway for that fourth tight end to even make it to 64.
Yeah, honestly, so I had Mason Taylor going in like the, I don't want to say like mid-second round, but it was like might have been like early 50s, and I'm like, yeah, he's gonna. I got to that point, I was
he
like,
was
yeah,
like golden. We're like, yeah,
he's gonna go earlier than this, and so if he goes even earlier than that, if he goes 31, I'm just saying, or if he goes 41, yeah, my guess is Arroyo would probably go earlier than where the Eagles ended up going with him. But that's the nature of it, right? Like, who would have guessed that Quinyon Mitchell was going to fall to the Eagles last year?
Sure.
It's the draft is an exercise of runs, right? And so, when you have the 3 guards go off the board in 4 picks, or 3 safeties go off the board in 6 picks, other positions are obviously going to fall. If tight end happens a little bit earlier, then yeah, my guess is Arroyo would not fall to 64.
All right, there you go. Well, we look forward to seeing how it all plays out. We will be live throughout the draft proceedings next Thursday, Friday, Saturday, right here on PHLY. We've got the Eagles show coming up at 2 o'clock. And then tonight, remember, if you're watching this on Thursday, make your way to J.D. McGillicuddy's in Manayunk, 6 o'clock, the PHLY Draft Summit with Fran and Cuz and a whole bunch of characters popping in. So
it's going to be a lot of fun.
Looking forward to checking it out. For Fran, thank you so much. For Andrew for stepping in. I'm Bo. We thank you for watching. We will talk to you next Tuesday. We're going to do that finally, the live chat bag.
You say we.
I mean, I'm not going to be here, most likely. But, there's a possibility. And that'll be our final pre-draft PHLY draft show with Fran Duffy. We'll have a few more after the draft is over to look back on how it all played out. But thanks for Fran doing all the heavy lifting. We'll talk to you next weekend. We'll talk to you next week.
We all silly like the mayor.